go ahead and get started. And welcome everyone to the August 22nd meeting of the Lawrence Douglas County Planning Commission. To begin, we have a couple of minutes to approve, our action summaries from May 23rd of this year. Does anyone like to make a motion to approve or have any changes?
So moved.
We have a second? All right. All in favor? Aye. And the minutes from the July 25th meeting.
Move to approve.
Tim? Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor? We have 8-0 on both counts. Do we have any committee reports from any committees that have met through the month? Yes.
The Metropolitan Planning Organization Policy Board met last Thursday. We had two main action items. One was approval of the revised public participation plan, which is how the MPO staff accepts feedback from the public. The other one was a small amendment to the fiscal year 17 TIP amendment, TIP program. There was no further business.
All right. Any other committees met during the month? All right. Communications. Do we have any written communications from the public that were not in our packet? How about written communications from staff, other commissioners, or the planning commission? Thank you. Do we have any written action of waiver requests or determinations by the city engineer?
Nope.
All right. And do we have any disclosure of ex parte communications on any of the agenda items for tonight? I believe perhaps you do.
I have a disclosure to make at least. I did receive a political campaign contribution from the Quarry back in 2016, my unsuccessful bid for county commission, but it will not affect my decision or my deliberations on the matter. So.
And do we have any advice on that? Is that something that would require him to abstain, or are we okay with that?
Yeah, he's fine. There's no substantial interest in that.
Okay.
Just a campaign contribution 2 years ago. So no conflict of interest.
Thank you. Any other ex parte communications or abstentions? So she asked for abstentions specifically from specific agenda items. Anyone? And then at this time, we have a time allowed for 3 minutes for each person for general public comment that is unrelated to one of the items on our agenda. Does anyone have any public comment that is unrelated to tonight's agenda? Okay. We'll move into our regular meeting, and as we do, we have a pretty good amount of members of the community tonight, so I want to just explain our process, and that is that we hear on each item from staff for their report, and then we hear from the applicant that has 10 minutes for each item that they have on the agenda. And then after that, we open up the floor for public comment, and that's 3 minutes per person to address their concerns. During that time, we won't necessarily engage in a conversation. We will hold any questions that you have for later as it comes back up to the commission for our discussion. The applicant then will have a chance to, I think 5 minutes, is that right, to then speak to any of the public comment before it comes up to us. So on item number 1, we have the final development plan for Bauer Farm.
Good evening, Commissioners. Sandy Day. This item is a final development plan that was originally zoned under the old code. So the final development plan is its own zoning. Preliminary development plan for this property was approved originally in, I believe actually that was 2015, and part of the old code, as I mentioned, and so it requires the Planning Commission's action for approval. The plan developments that are approved under the 2006 code actually are administrative. So Bauer Farm is a project that includes a couple of different zonings. The parts that are highlighted in red are part of the original PCD that are predominantly built out. We have this remaining parcel. The parts highlighted in yellow are zoned PRD. There is one piece that is zoned POD, which is planned office. And then this piece was actually zoned out of that original PCD into its own area, and it is referred to as Bauer Farm Northwest, and that is where the sprouts, the pet store and the hotel are located, and we did a separate text amendment and zoning for that property. The project is largely being built out. We have a few remaining parcels. This is one of those parcels that's being requested for development. There is a piece that is in the northwest that is still vacant, and the POD piece that is still vacant, as well as portion in the PRD, but none of those pieces are affected by this request. The approved preliminary development plan showed originally a 6,000 plus square foot building with parking, with a shared access, shared with the drive-through restaurant immediately to the west, and showed some on-street parking along Bauer Farm Drive. This is just a slide of that existing development today with the apartments that have been constructed on the east side, the restaurants that are located to the west, Bauer Farm Drive on the north, and 6th Street on the south. Plans submitted for final development approval shall be in substantial compliance with the previously given approval for the preliminary. The modifications may not increase the residential gross density or substantially increase the intensity of the development. They cannot increase the total floor area, and they cannot increase the area of the ground covered by the buildings. So those are the criteria that we look at for substantial compliance for this project. There is not a residential component to it. The building is much smaller than what was originally approved in the project, and the building coverage is also much smaller. The project still retains that same shared access. The building is located and pushed over further to the west, and it includes that same connectivity to West 6th Street that was always part of this project. This slide really is intended to highlight the difference and the similarities between the approved what was shown in the preliminary development plan and the changes in the proposed final. The parking is a little bit different. That's a function of how the building is laid out to be able to have this access on the side of the building and still have two-way parking. Moving all of this activity as far away to the west side of the site, further away from that residential use on that east side. This site always had a little bit of excess parking. They were not required to mitigate for parking. They do have more green space than what was shown on the previous plan, and that really is more a function of the way the street on Bauer Farm is laid out. The development side of the project, the original developer always showed some on-street parking. That was always to be something that was done not by the individual developers of these lots, but by the development group. So if at some point in the future the development group wants to come in and add that on-street parking, they would have a set of public improvement plans that they would come in with. We would work through that through the public improvement plans. Would not necessarily need to do an amendment to a final development plan. We would handle it through those public improvement plans. Would probably have some modification to some of the sidewalks along those pieces if that were to come forward. Staff's recommendation for the final development plan is for approval. There were no conditions related to that final development plan, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Sandy. Is the applicant available? Would you care to make a presentation, or?
I don't believe there's anything else that I would have to add. I believe that staff covered
Okay.
pretty much everything that we would have to say.
Thank you. We may ask you questions later.
No problem, thank you.
Are there any members of the public who'd like to speak on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public portion of the meeting and bring it back to the commission for discussion. Or motions. Commissioner Struckoff.
I would like to move that we approve the final development plan for Bauer Farm Verizon based on the finding of fact presented in the body of the staff report.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Is there any other discussion? We can't make it that easy.
Can I just ask a question to staff before we vote?
Thank you.
Sandy, the other lots that were developed in Bauer Farm, were they all developed with the on-street parking at the
Some-
same time?
I think the on-street parking came further to the west, further past Champion. I think this piece, where the Burger King and the Zaxby's does not have that on-street parking. For whatever reason, the developer did not do it
Okay.
when they
so-
constructed the street.
Okay. So the ones that are adjacent to where this one is don't have on-street parking as well? Okay. I couldn't visualize that. Okay.
All right, do we have any other questions or discussion?
Just want to make sure this one has the wall.
It does.
All right.
So I mentioned too bad Commissioner Kelly isn't here to see the landscape wall details. He would appreciate that.
I'm filling in for him.
Good deal.
All right, I think we're ready for a vote. All in favor of approval? And we've passed 8-0.
Thank you.
Okay, the second item, rezoning of 708 Elm Street.
Good evening, everybody. Luke Mortensen, City County Planner. Like Commissioner Willie just said, I'll be talking about the rezoning request for 708 Elm Street from RS7 to RSO. So just a quick refresher of the subject property's location. We are in the southeast corner at the intersection of Elm Street and North 7th Street up in North Lawrence. The Ballard Center came into existence under the 1966 zoning code. This code permitted various uses under the community facility use group. The Ballard Center social service uses were permitted as accessory uses to the community facility designation. With the adoption of the Land Development Code in 2006, the site was rezoned to RS7. The center's children's program remained a permitted use as the daycare center use is permitted in the RS7 district. The center's social services uses, which staff defines as a social service agency use, are not permitted in the RS7 district. The center's social service programs became non-conforming uses. The Ballard Center is currently expanding its clothing donation program, which would constitute an expansion of a non-conforming use. Staff informed the Ballard Center that the Land Development Code does not permit the expansion of a non-conforming use, and rezoning to RSO would return the center's uses to conformity. The area surrounding the subject property is comprised of mostly RS7 and open space districts. However, North Lawrence has a number of zoning districts, including CS, IG, and other RSO districts within the surrounding blocks. Single-dwelling residential land use dominates this portion of North Lawrence. However, other land uses include open space to the south, commercial and industrial uses to the north, as well as other institutional land uses such as church and Woodlawn School to the east and northwest, or excuse me, to the west and northwest. Horizon 2020, the comprehensive plan, does not directly address social service agency use, but it does address low to medium density residential neighborhoods. Across Lawrence and in portions of North Lawrence, the RSO district acts as a buffer and transition zone between higher intensity uses and lower intensity uses. The existing RSO district along Locust Street acts as a buffer between the IG district to the north and the railroad tracks, and the RS5 and RS7 districts to the south. Our subject property is not directly adjacent to any higher intensity uses, but would function broadly as a transition zone between the various districts and uses along North 2nd, Elm, and Locust Streets. Horizon 2020 also lists identifiable hubs as elements of a strong neighborhood. The Ballard Center programs, Woodlawn School, and John Taylor Park all contribute to the public space component of an identifiable neighborhood hub. The neighborhood, the subject property does not fall within any specific area plan that's recognized or adopted by Horizon 2020, but it is covered within the 1981 North Lawrence Neighborhood Plan. That plan specifically calls for the Ballard Center to remain an important neighborhood asset. It also noted that non-residential facilities shall serve the neighborhood without adversely affecting the residential nature of the surrounding area. Finally, the neighborhood plan recommends rezoning properties so that they're consistent with their land use. That plan recognizes that a lot of the land uses up there don't quite match their zoning districts. Rezoning from RS7 to RSO would bring consistency between the Ballard Center's land uses and its zoning district. The RSO district at its base is a low-density residential district that conforms with the surrounding and existing RS7 district. A site plan for the expansion of the social service agency use is currently under staff review at this time. It will be reviewed against the standards laid out in the Land Development Code to prevent detrimental effects to nearby properties. The RS7 district does not permit social service agency use. Rezoning to RSO, like I said, would correct the nonconformity and allow for the site to continue to operate as a community facility. Subject property is not vacant, and it's been operating as a Ballard Center since the 1960s. Finally, denial of this request would maintain the RS7 zoning. There would be little gain to the public health, safety, and welfare, as denial would only preserve an existing nonconforming use. In conclusion, staff recommends forwarding the rezoning request for 708 Elm Street from RS7 to RSO to the City Commission with a recommendation for approval. I can stand for questions, and I believe the applicant and some of her design staff are here tonight as well.
Thank you, Luke.
Good evening. My name is Lauren Davis with Trainer HL. I'm also on the Board of Directors for Ballard Center. We also have Brad Dye here on the Board of Directors and Becky Price, who is the Ballard Center Director. And we're happy to answer any questions. We don't have anything further. I think staff covered it, so.
Okay, thank you. We may have questions. Now, this is a public hearing item. Do we have any members of the public who'd like to speak on this item? Okay. If you could sign in, please, sir.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Ted Boyle, President of North Lawrence Improvement, and I would encourage you to forward this rezoning from RS7 to RSO, and I'd like to give you a little update. We had a neighborhood meeting just concerning this item, and we had it at Ballard and invited the residents of North Lawrence and also the people that live on Elm Street and Locust and Walnut Street. Becky Price hand-delivered invitations to these residents. And so that evening, we had a pretty good turnout at the Ballard, and a lot of questions asked and answered, and there was really no definite objection to this happening. The questions mainly that were asked was, as always, parking and traffic. And so those questions were answered, and so it was kind of unanimously agreed that this would be a good deal. And we've always looked at the Ballard as an asset to North Lawrence. And so we take pride in having the Ballard in our neighborhood. So I encourage you to pass this rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have another? You can step on up.
Hi, evening, folks. My name's Sean Teener. I live at 707 Elm, directly across from the Ballard Center, so I'll sign in here. And I'd like to start by saying The Ballard Center has unfortunately not been the greatest neighbor to me. It's been a challenge, and I will explain why, but the biggest concern I have right now with the request to rezone the property doesn't necessarily involve my experience with Ballard. It actually involves the way they've laid out their plan, and I think it deserves a deeper dive by the Planning Commission, is they've set up some sheds next to the property. And while that may or may not impact my property value, the intersection at 7th and Elm is an enormous hazard to the community. It is not a four-way stop. It is a two-way stop for east-westbound traffic on Elm Street. Traffic going north and south on Elm, unfortunately, does not have a stop sign. And I'm sure at the time that was designed, it made sense. With increased traffic in that area, there has been an enormous number of traffic accidents at that intersection. My kids have repeatedly almost been hit by traffic zooming into the Ballard Center to get and pick up kids. I think if you start to look at the deeper issues of the way the intersection is laid out and the fact that there are no speed bumps on the street in my section of the street, you have a larger problem, and one that needs some serious evaluation by you to determine if rezoning this area makes sense for the community. The street's a hazard, it's a danger, and I think at this time, before you vote yes and decide unanimously that some folks are happy with it, you should look at what the other neighbors have to say. I do respect that Becky did come around and offer to meet with us. Unfortunately, I couldn't make that meeting. I had to work, so it just didn't work out. At that point, and that being said, we've had challenges with Ballard Center employees. They have been not pleasant to my family. We've had multiple issues with employees from the center, and I think that it needs an evaluation by you guys to determine if it should move forward. So with that, I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Can you tell me your name again, sir?
Sean Teener, I live at 707 Elm. Thanks.
Thank you. Additional public comment?
Can I have one time
We may ask you later when we
Okay.
have it, when we get to our discussion.
concerning the traffic and speed humps?
Do we have any other members of the public who'd like to speak on this item? Then we'd ask the applicant to come back up if you'd like to address anything that you had heard here. You'll have 5 minutes.
I would just say we're currently under review for the site planning approval. That hasn't been an issue. A traffic study was not required, but it was considered. But it is good to hear this is the first that I've heard of that. So it may be something worth looking into during the site plan review if an additional stop sign would be required. So.
Thank you. At that, we will close the public portion of this item and bring it back to the commission for discussion.
Okay, I'll start with a question, Mr. Boyle. Would you come on up?
Thank you.
Is Elm one of the streets that you've been working on getting speed humps?
Exactly. We have got, let's see, 7 more traffic calming devices to be installed, and we have the money for it. Previously, the city, they had a backlog of a couple of years on traffic calming devices. Well, I figured out a way to get that money from CDBG, and so we got 5 from the CDBG committee. They gave us 5, and then we've got 2 more slated for Elm and Walnut, and with the 5th one of that 5 floating around, see where it's going to land. And what we're waiting for, we got about $48,000 worth of CDBG money waiting for the city to install them, and that money pays for not only the material to build it, but also the labor. The city gets paid to put them in. So it's a win-win situation. There's no cost. So there's some slated to go on Elm Street.
How close to 7th Street are those?
It'd be past 7th about, a third of the way down the block. And then there'll probably be another one towards 8th Street. And, that intersection is a very, accidents, it's not a high accident intersection, so, and I live on Elm Street too, so, and I've lived in North Lawrence for about 68 years, so.
Okay. Thanks. I guess question to staff. Anybody from staff have any information about accident rates at that intersection or any concerns from the traffic engineer?
So I'll just say, I think this is the first we've heard the input about this specificity of the issue there. We're happy to look into that, determine if this is a intersection that the engineers are looking at for accident-prone issues. But it's good to get these comments because we are doing the site plan as well. And so, there are different criteria used for zoning versus the site plan. And so we welcome any comments or visits by neighbors to come down and talk to us about the site plan issues as well, since that is actively in process today. But if these kinds of issues truly exist on the streets, and they did meet warrants for some traffic calming, so there's some traffic on these streets, then they're important to us to review and work out with the site plan.
And at what point do we see the site plan? Will that come to this body?
No, that's an administrative determination.
If anyone has any concerns about, the traffic or the placement of things on the site plan, where should they take those concerns?
They should bring them to us. We're the department in charge of processing that application.
Okay. And Mr. Teenan, is that something acceptable that you can then follow up with the staff here about additional concerns and see what's happening with that? And if you'd like to come up, since I did ask you a question, you can take the podium then if you'd like. Sorry, Mr. Boyle.
I'd like to say one
No,
thing too.
I'm sorry, Mr. Boyle, we haven't asked you a question, but we will in a
Okay.
moment.
Elm Street is a
Sir.
one-way street to 7th, two-way on down.
Thank you. I appreciate the offer to come in. There have been numerous accidents, one almost fatal at that intersection. The car ended up on its side in my yard. So I can speak from firsthand experience that it's not a safe intersection. It has never been. At that intersection, traffic can begin to go the wrong way on Elm Street. So where Mr. Boyle is speaking of, it is a one-way. At that intersection, it begins a two-way. I think when you have the additional traffic and the additional option of people that are not familiar with the area, I daily encounter folks going the wrong way on Elm Street. It's a hazard. I'm sorry, but it is. It deserves a four-way intersection. There should be a traffic control well before 7th Street, not only sitting at 4th, but probably at 6th. And I think you guys should look at it. I think you need to. I think you have to. And impact safety. The sheds that are there block your view. They just got installed. I can't see around them in the morning.
So I think we have a few issues that will also be looked at with the site plan. But some of those are, all of this kind of goes beyond our rezoning, which we're looking
Okay.
at right now.
Understood.
However, I would like just personally for you to follow up with the city engineer about your concerns, just to make sure that those are heard and understood.
Okay, who would that be?
Scott?
You can go through me, Scott McCullough,
Scott
in
McCullough.
the planning office.
Okay.
And we can, in fact, after this, maybe Luke can find you after this item and give you some contact information
That'd be great.
about it, because what I'm sensing is that the issues you're commenting on exist whether or not this gets rezoned in some capacity, if it's a matter of the street issues and the one-way versus two-way and things. So
Yeah.
we'll engage the city engineering staff and make some determinations.
Yeah, the plan, the way
No,
they've
sir,
set it,
we're-
I
thank you.
apologize, the way they set it up, it
Um,
just blocks the view. You can't see it.
Any other comments from
Thanks,
our planning commission? Kind of going back to the issue of the rezone specifically.
No, I do have a question for the Ballard Center. Somebody from Ballard Center, if you could come up and...
If you use your mic, they'll know you're talking to
Oh,
them.
I don't do that very often. I just have a question for somebody from the Ballard Center, if you could come up to the podium, please. Well, it's not about the zoning, it's about the anticipated use that's triggered the need for the rezoning request, about wanting to have the furniture and the other drop-off there. What kind of increased traffic or usage do you anticipate from adding that service?
Well, we don't, first of all, there's no furniture.
Okay.
That we already have the food and the clothing for children, and we're going to add clothing for adults and basic household goods. We are changing a lot of the different, the intake process, so it's a little bit challenging for us until we get into it to understand how many clients, the change in the number of clients that come. And I know that's maybe not the answer you want, and I don't know if it's evenings, but I have never, there's no traffic on Elm Street. I don't understand what the example of enormous would be, but we don't anticipate a huge increase in traffic.
All right, the neighbor indicated that you had some storage sheds or units. Are those just temporary until you?
No, and I think I might have them on my phone. I can't understand how they would block, I don't know. Yeah.
Also, we'll tag team this. Also, in the site plan review, view sheds do have to be considered in any sort of site plan review. Certain setbacks from the corner so that we can guarantee safety of driving. So that has definitely been considered as well of all the easements that are required.
So the placement at this point is temporary until the site plan gets
The
finalized?
placement is permanent, but the site plan has been, so we're going through this at the same time as the site plan. If for some reason, although it's been discussed with city staff that that's a correct place to place those, if that doesn't end up being the case, then they'll be moved.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess I
Commissioner
have a
Carter.
question for staff, if I may. So just to kind of recap how we got here, prior to the rezoning that created the RS7 in the neighborhood, the Ballard Center already existed, more or less within its current, operational profile. And the proposal here is essentially to return this pre-existing facility to compliance. Is that fair to summarize?
Correct, yeah, bring it back into conformity.
Okay, great. Just wanted to confirm what we were being asked to decide on. Thanks.
Further comments?
I have a question for staff, and hopefully this isn't too far afield, but why is it that the North Lawrence Neighborhood Plan is not recognized in the comprehensive plan?
I'm not sure there is one to recognize. If it is, it's old enough that we only go back so far in our comprehensive plan and acknowledge the more recent ones.
Okay.
Questions?
Yes, how recent is more recent ones?
We'd have to look at the plan, but I can think of the Northwest plan, for example, was, I don't know, Jeff, do you have an idea when that was? From kind of the 90s was our cutoff. So we do consult them for information when we have something in an area to bring you. But some of them have been so far out of date that so much has changed contextually about an area that they're no longer of a lot of value in the discussions.
So since Commissioner Sinclair's taken us off into the weeds on this briefly, so it would be beneficial for neighborhoods that have plans to review those and update those. How often?
Well, it would, in a perfect world, every 5 or 10 years, we'd be able to get in there. We've probably, I know that we've got 2 or 3 neighborhoods that would like to establish their first neighborhood plan or an update to a neighborhood plan. So it becomes a little bit a matter of resources for us and for the neighborhoods who spend a lot of volunteer time and work on getting them established and drafted and ready to review. But we do talk to neighborhoods about that very thing, and I think you'll see after the comprehensive plan effort that we'll be back at doing some of that in the future.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Commissioner Butler.
I recommend that we approve the request to rezone approximately 8.81 acres from RS7 district to RSO district based on the findings presented in the staff report and forwarding it to the City Commission with a recommendation for approval.
Thank you. Do you have a second? Commissioner Carter? Motion and a second. All in favor? Or do we have any further discussion? All in favor?
Can I?
You do?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I just want to say that I would like to get on the record. I think Ballard Center is an incredible organization. My wife has taught at Woodlawn for years, and all I hear is high praise for the services that the center provides to the students and families that she's been involved with at Woodlawn. And I can understand some of the comments that a neighbor has made, but I think that those are, as we've pointed out, more appropriately directed to staff as they go through the site plan process and not necessarily for the rezoning in front of us. So I wholeheartedly support this request to rezone.
Thank you. All in favor of recommending approval? And opposed is none, so the 8-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 3, conditional use permit for the Big Springs Quarry.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Mary Miller, one of the planning staff, and this is a conditional use permit for Big Springs Quarry. The quarry contains about 800 acres. It's located on the west of the county line. Actually, some of the quarry extends westward into Shawnee County. The black area on the slide above shows the existing CUP as well as the area that's requested to be added to it. And before I get into it, I thought I'd go over a history of this CUP and the different times it's been before the Commission. In July of 1990, the CUP application was submitted for a 720-acre quarry, and that was approved in March of 1992. Then in June of 1992, there was an amendment to add another 80 acres, and that was approved in September of 1992. And in the attachment A that had all the conditions and restrictions of use, each one of these had their individual restrictions and conditions. And then in 1992, also, there was an administrative amendment to CUP 7290 to add a shop facility. And so the shop was added along with the list of conditions for that. That was approved in March of 1993. And the quarry began operation in 1993. They had to install a haul road from the plant site up to the north to Highway 40, and so that was being done during that interim. It quarried until December of 2006, when the original operator, Martin Marietta, was going to transfer the operator, sell the quarry to Mid-States Materials. And one of the conditions of the quarry CUP is that whenever the operator changes, the CUP has to come back to the Planning Commission so we can review the track record of the new operator to be sure that they're appropriate to take over the quarry. And as we went through that, we found some compliance issues, And so you'll see the conditions that were applied to the transfer of operator had to do with landscaping and fencing, some items we found that Martin Marietta had not kept up. And then in July of 2008, Mid-States brought a request to expand the quarry and extend the time frame, fairly similar to the one today. And as we reviewed that, we discovered there were some other compliance issues. Primarily, there was a very large overburdened pile that Mid-States Marietta had left. We weren't aware of it, but the neighbors indicated that that had not been a hill before. And so that CUP was withdrawn, and Mid-States Materials entered into a consent decree with the county commission to bring the site into compliance. We identified that there had been some reclamation plans that had not been submitted as required, and so everything was brought up to date, and that was approved in March 9th of 2011. And so those reclamation plans and some studies that hadn't been done, and that overburden pile that was reduced to an acceptable level. And then in 2013, the quarry was in phase 3, which is on the southeastern portion of that quarry property, and they wanted to move across the road to quarry phase 6. And so they submitted an application to allow them to amend the phasing schedule. And the county commission did approve that, and they said you can quarry in any phase. We won't look at the numbers as being sequential. And so in this CUP, you'll notice that the phases are all listed by colors, so there's no sequence being implied with the phasing. And then that brings us to the current CUP. And so I'll go over a little bit about just basically what the changes are that are being requested with the CUP. There is a change of area. They would like to remove the areas that have been quarried and reclaimed, and the reclamation has been approved and completed. And they would like to add approximately 570 acres. That brings the total quarry size to about 1,049 acres. And there's always another figure of 969 because it depends upon which legal description you're using. In the county, the legal description goes to the center of the roadway, and that's the 1,049 acres. The quarry itself does not go into the roadway, so the 969 acres is what we use when we just look at the parcel map. This shows that area. The area highlighted in yellow was the CUP is currently approved. The ones that are struck through, those are the phases that have been completed. Reclamation is complete, and those are requested to be removed from the CUP. This is the phase they're currently in, that's phase 6. This is a 40-acre plant site, that's where the scale house is, that would remain. There's a haul road along the west side, and then everything in green would be added. They're also requesting an increase in the area that can be open and mined from. The quarry uses sequential reclamation, which means that when you open your very first hole, that overburden is put into a pile. But after that, whenever you open a new hole, the overburden from that hole is put into the old hole. So you're not creating one giant hole. You'll never have a hole over a certain size open at one time. And today that acreage is 30 acres, and they would like to see that increased to 40 acres. And the applicant indicated that that's to allow them to use the larger machinery. It'll be more efficient and easier for them to maneuver the larger machinery in the 40 acres. They're also requesting a change in operating hours. So Monday through Friday, today you can go from 6 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. They would like that to be extended to 6 p.m. And they would like to add sale hours of Saturday from 7 a.m. to noon. Today you can do production and extraction, quarrying from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and from 6 a.m. to 5:30 on Friday, and they would like Friday extended to 6 p.m. And in the conditions, you'll see there's a list of holidays that quarrying is not allowed on. I received a call from a member of the public who informed me that we had omitted Martin Luther King Day and Veterans Day, so those two should be added to that list of holidays. And in the original CUP that we have, there's a requirement that the berms along the perimeter of the quarry, along the right-of-way, be 50 feet wide. But these berms are, to create the berms, you use the topsoil that you remove from that phase. And so whatever topsoil you have is what you use to create the berms. And so requiring 50-foot wide berms, you may need more topsoil than you actually have. You could create them 50-foot wide if you have that much topsoil, but it doesn't really help a berm to be wider. That doesn't increase the screening ability. They need to be between 6 and 8 feet tall and built at a 3-to-1 slope. And so we're suggesting removing that requirement that they be 50 feet wide. With blasting, the condition that we have now for blasting is proposed to be changed. Currently, it says that the operator will pick up all off-site fly rock, and fly rock is basically just the rock and materials that fly when you blast. That's proposed to be changed to no fly rock shall leave the property, because that's the goal, is that you don't have rock leaving your blasting area and leaving your property. The current conditions have a section which explains how the operator is supposed to handle the blasting, how they deal with their employees, what they have them do while they're blasting. That's being removed. MSHA, that's the Mine Safety and Health Administration, they have the safety procedures for the blasting that should be followed, and Mid-States contracts with a blasting company. And so I don't believe that our safety precautions we had in 1990 are up to date with MSHA requires, so we suggest removing those. Another change that's being made is to the monitoring blasting. That's where you put in a seismograph before you do blasting. You put it adjacent to the houses within a half mile or near them, and you can monitor the level of vibrations, and you can monitor the blast before you begin blasting. And then the quarry operator, they contract with an independent seismograph company, and they place seismographs, and then they monitor. They have a continual monitoring going on of the size and the impact of the blasting. And then members of the public can request copies of those blasting reports, seismograph reports. The thing that's being changed is that it has a member of the public can request more seismograph testing than what the company originally proposes. But it states that the quarry does not have to do more testing than what that company says is necessary. And appeals from that currently go to the county commission, but it seems more appropriate for it to go to the county engineer, because that's more of an engineering question, rather than something that the county commission would handle. And the county engineer indicated he was agreeable to having that appeal come to him. So that's a minor change, but just deals with how the appeals are handled. Noise and light pollution is also being changed slightly. Today we have a requirement that all heavy equipment have a strobe light, and that's being removed because today many equipments have their own safety lighting. They're not always strobe lights, and so they'll just have the safety lighting that they're equipped with. Today we have a requirement that the audible warning, that beeping, be turned off. And the county engineer indicated that would be in violation of safety regulations, so that's being removed. And there is a requirement that all lighting be low-pressure sodium, and that's being removed. There is a requirement that lighting not glare to other properties, and so all lighting would be reviewed, but it does not all have to be low-pressure sodium. Today, currently, there is a requirement for a $10,000 bond for any damage to personal property, and the applicant is requesting to change that to a $1 million insurance, liability insurance, rather than the bond. The current CUP requires a pre-blast survey. It doesn't really specify when these are to be done, so the revised conditions do note that before you moved into any phase, you do a pre-blast study. And what that is, you contract with an independent firm, and they do a survey of your house. They take pictures and videos to document the existing condition. Where are there cracks? What's the foundation situation? And so you'll have a documentation of what the conditions are prior to quarrying. And so it clarifies when you do that. We also added a requirement that 1 month before you move into that phase, you notify all property owners within a half mile by certified mail, and you provide notice to the planning office. That way people are aware they have the option to request that pre-blast study. And so I think that will be an improvement. We currently require a hydrologic study, which is primarily you measure the depths of the well, and that way you can see if the quarrying is having any impact on the depths of the wells in the area. And so we've added a requirement to notify property owners for that as well. And then a more detailed study would be needed if you go below 1042. That depth was established with the transfer of operator or below the local water table. With the shop facility, most of those conditions are being removed. They were primarily involved with site plan changes, things that were immediately taken care of. But the condition that all repair and maintenance is limited to equipment that's used on the site. It's not a place to bring large equipment in for repairs. That condition is being kept. There was a condition that all work would be done inside the shop, but occasionally you have equipment that breaks down out on the site. And since they're so large, it's difficult to bring them to the site, so we removed the requirement that you have to do all maintenance work within that shop. We were contacted by a member of the public. It was a neighboring property owner to the south, and they were interested in seeing that Phase 6 be completed as quickly as possible. They have plans to build closer to the quarry than what they live now. We worked with them and with the operator to come up with the condition you see on the screen. I think they would like to see a little bit more information as to when this should be completed. But it basically states that they're going to keep quarrying Phase 6. So they're not going to stop and go to another county, or they're not going to stop and just stop. They'll continually quarry it within the CUP restrictions until it's done, so it can be done as quickly as possible. So we'll look at some of the CUP, the golden factors. One thing you look for is what is the compatibility with the zoning and land uses in the area. The zoning in the area is primarily A. There was a section to the southeast that was zoned A1 back in 2005. That has not been developed, but it's a rural subdivision that could develop with residences. The phase just to the north of it is Phase 3. That's completed, and it's been reclaimed, and that's one of the phases that would be removed from the CUP. With the quarry, land that's not being quarried remains in agricultural production or remains as rural open space. When quarrying is completed, it's reclaimed again to agricultural or rural open space. So the quarry would be compatible with the agricultural zoning in the area. When we look at the land uses in the nearby area, I've dotted the areas that have residences. The yellow ones are residences that are owned by others, and the red dots are residences that are owned by mid-states. So when we look at the compatibility of the quarry with nearby land uses, these residences are the ones that are probably would be the most impacted, and it would be important to set conditions and setbacks primarily that would mitigate the impact on these residences. And I'll talk about those setbacks and other measures a little later. We also look at the character of the area. As you expand out, you'll see that the area is primarily an agricultural area. We have Big Springs Quarry to the north, and there are residences along the highway and along Route 1023, as well as some scattered residences throughout the area. But the quarry would be compatible with the character of the area, provided that they take steps to minimize any impact on those nearby residences. We always look at what is the suitability of the subject property to the uses to which it's restricted. It's A district. It'll continue to be A until it's quarried, and after it's quarried, it'll be returned to agricultural or open space uses. So the property is suitable for the agricultural uses. And the length of time the property has been vacant, as I mentioned earlier, it's been used as a quarry since it had a CUP approval in 1992, and it's been used as a CUP or a quarry since 1993. And then we look at the conformance with the comprehensive plan. The residential chapter recommends that agricultural uses should be the predominant use outside the urban growth area, and that residential development should be limited so that land is not necessarily removed from agricultural production. And the quarry would be in compliance with this recommendation, as land would be returned to agricultural production when quarrying is complete. The industrial and employment chapter recommends that you protect, enhance, and retain existing industrial-related land use areas serving the community, and the quarry would be an industrial-related land use. And the environmental chapter encourages responsible use of marketable natural resources within Douglas County through proper extraction and reclamation methods. They are essential to sustainable development activity, primarily in the form of low-cost raw materials. And so the quarry and its continued use would be in compliance with the recommendations in the comprehensive plan. Other factors we look at that are sometimes the most important factors are the detrimental effect of CUP to nearby properties, and the relative gain to the public health, safety, and welfare by the denial versus the hardship to the applicant. And as I mentioned, most of the detrimental effect to the CUP would be to those nearby residences, and so we would look primarily at setbacks. The hours of operation are important. With quarries, a lot of times you look at where are the trucks going to be going. This CUP has a requirement that all trucks use the haul road that's on private property. It goes up to Highway 40, unless you're a local delivery. If you're a local delivery, you can use County Route 442 to the south, and you're not allowed to use any township roads. And so the issue of traffic and dust isn't an issue with this quarry. But we'd want to take a close look at the setbacks, and I'll look at all of those in detail in a moment. The relative gain to the public health, safety, and welfare, as long as we mitigate the negative impact, there would be no relative gain. The hardship to the applicant would be that they would not be able to continue quarrying this location. And in addition, there could be a hardship to the county, as this is a principal source of construction materials for the county. Douglas County themselves use gravel from here, as well as other construction companies throughout the county. This shows the graphic of the quarry. The area outlined in blue is the new area being added. The yellow, as shown previously, that's what's requested to be removed from the CUP because quarrying is complete, reclamation is done and approved. And we have the current phase down in the south corner. And the dots, I've showed more of the residences in the area. These green areas are land that's been purchased by Mid-States in order to provide a buffer between the quarry and some residences in the area. And these are the various phases, and I'm going to go through and discuss the setbacks. I know there was an exhibit in the packet which showed the setbacks for each phase, but I'm going to overlay, kind of roughly overlay the setbacks on an aerial, which kind of gives a better view. So first we have the pink area, and that's 169 acres, so I can find out. And so this shows the setbacks that are being proposed. A 100-foot setback along the west, the east, and then along the north, except where the residence is located in that northeast corner. There's a 500-foot residential setback, so you're setback 500 foot from the residence. To the south, they're proposing a setback of this natural wooded area that would remain, and that's about 600 feet by 1135. And in addition, the area to the north would be setback. So primarily the northeast corner would be a setback from this residence. The residence to the east is marked in red. That's owned by Mid-States, and no additional setback is proposed for that. And in the southwest corner, there's a 100-foot setback for Westar for their overhead power lines. And then we'll look at the blue phase just to the east. With this, we have a part of that residential setback for the parcel on the pink, near the pink phase, extends into here. We have also the 500-foot residential setbacks for two other adjacent nearby residences, and then a 100-foot setback proposed on three sides. No setbacks proposed on the south except for a natural buffer area. It's a little bit too far north in this picture, but there are trees just right below that, and that's being protected as additional setback for that residence. And then we go to the aqua phase, just south of the pink phase. This southern portion is part of the original CUP, so the part to the north is being added. We have the Westar setback crossing the line, and then we have 100-foot setbacks on the east and the west. And there's quarrying to the north, and then this phase is to the south. And then we move to the orange. And the orange also has the Westar line. It has the 500-foot setback for the residents, along with a very large natural area being included in the setback. It's the area with all the trees, about 1,810 feet by 930 feet. And then we have peripheral setbacks along the roadways of 100 feet. And then we have the purple phase. This is the phase they're currently quarrying. There's a 260-foot setback along the county route, a 400-foot setback along the south property line, and a triangular setback in the southeast corner. These are very similar to the setbacks that are applied today. The only difference is today we have a 100-foot mining setback here and a 260-foot blasting setback, and they just want to use the one setback, so they're using the larger setback. You can't mine or blast within this 260 feet. And the last one is this green phase. And so they're proposing a 100-foot setback on the west, the north, and the east, with a 700-foot setback on the south. Formerly, there was, I believe, a 500-foot setback on the south. This is being increased. There was a larger setback on the north, but with Mid-States owning the property to the north, that setback is being reduced. And so it's kind of a whirlwind discussion of that item. But staff recommends approval, forwarding the CUP to the county commission with a recommendation for approval, subject to the findings of facts in the staff report and the conditions that were listed at the end of the staff report, with the addition of those 2 holidays that we missed. And I know the applicant is present today as well.
Thank you, Mary. And we have had a request from the applicant to extend the typical comment or presentation time from 10 minutes to 15 minutes for this item because of its complexity, and I, as chair, have granted that request. However, if anyone on the Planning Commission would like to override by vote, you are allowed to do that. Do we see any interest in that? All right, then for the applicant, thank you. You'll have 15 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Rich Eckert, and I'm with Mid-States Materials. I have with me tonight Cole Anderson. He's our environmental health and safety manager, and if the questions get too complicated, he bails me out. I have Eric Bettis. He's the managing member of the LLC, and our COO, Mike Shermer, is here up against the pillar. As I start, I did want to show you our product. Geologists call this calcium carbonate. In 104 counties, this is called limestone, but here, this is called rock chalk. And I'm sorry, I know that's cheesy, but this is the only place in the world I could say that line. And let's open up our slideshow. And I am double clicking. There we go. And this one. Okay. Again, we are Mid-States Materials. We are locally owned. We're family owned. Our corporate headquarters is, of course, in Topeka, but our operational headquarters, not only for the Big Springs Quarry, but for all of our quarries, is actually at Big Springs in Douglas County. We are a quarry company. We're an aggregate sales company, and we have a lot more to do with the environment than you think, and we're going to get into that. But when we take the keys from a landowner, the landowner gets say into how we walk away from the land. They'll either want row crops, they could want pasture, they could want natural habitat. With that in mind, from day one, we have to think about what we do, how we're going to touch the air, the sky, or the air and the land and the water to make sure that we end with what the landowner wants. So we're always thinking about how we're going to leave this land, and we do leave it better than we find it. That's a fact. I'm not even going to even say anything less than that. We leave the land better than we find it. Mary went through the history, so if you don't mind, I'm going to skip over my slide in the interest of time. We'll point out that some of the things that Mary pointed out, we found it that way, and we have fixed all those problems, and we had them all repaired or fixed or remedied by 2011. Here's a map that should be in your materials. It looks very complex, but I do want to point out just 4 things, as Mary said. And by the way, I do want to thank Mary. I know she's put a ton of work in this because I know how much work we put into it. So I do want to thank Mary for her time on this. The bottom left is the purple phase, and as Ms. Miller stated earlier, we are committed to finishing this phase. We're going to finish this phase before we move anywhere else. The next thing I want to point out is the plant operations. This is the functional heart of Big Springs and really all of our quarries, and I'm going to talk more about that here in a little bit. To the far left, you see the private haul road. That's a private road that we maintain, we paid for it, and that road outlets onto Highway 40. And that's important because Highway 40 is a state highway. It's heavily built to withstand truck traffic, and it keeps us off the county and township roads. Also, the sight lines are very good, and the entire time we've been here since 2007, we haven't had one accident at that intersection. Again, you see the buffer in green, and we worked hard with Mary to make sure that we have a good buffer, and we feel very good about that. And you see in red are the 500-foot setbacks of the houses, and then you see in brown, shaded brown, that's timber, and we've committed to preserve those areas, so we're not going to quarry in those timber areas. The setback, here's a better look at that. I do want to point out that on the east, the rather sizable yellow, that's Lone Oak. That's the name of that. The owners of Lone Oak came to us last year and said, hey, would you be interested in selling or buying? And we did buy that from them. It's 308 acres. It's agriculture and it's natural habitat. There's a sizable fishing pond on there. I'm here to tell you that we will never quarry that. That land is not quarryable. It's beautiful land, and I know that maybe some people had been a little anxious about our plans with that. We are not going to come back and ask for that. It is not land that can be quarried. So we're happy to own it, and it's beautiful, and we're going to keep it in that state. Here's just a little picture of what we've reclaimed so far. Those are phases 1A, phase 2, and phase 3. Those are current pictures of what it looks like today. Again, Mary went over the golden factors. I've been doing zoning law for 20 years, and I know that some factors are more important than others depending on the case. It changes. One factor could be more important in another case. I think for our matter, a couple of them are more important than others. I think the first one is the staff recommendation on something this complex and as much work as we put into it. We're proud that we got with Douglas County and we got their recommendation. We feel very good about that. The last one is Horizon 2020 and the conformance with the comprehensive plan. This is, of course, the CUP. It's outside of the zoning, right? So you could say it's outside of a comprehensive plan, but when you walk onto the quarry, it looks like industrial area. That's what it is. So we looked at how it coincides with the language in the industrial areas in the Horizon 2020. I know that's difficult to read, but it's in your materials. But I do just want to concentrate on that last bullet point, the one at the bottom. And it talks about continuing to address the needs of existing businesses and industries to ensure their retention in the community and to help facilitate expansion plans of those businesses and industries for the future. And that's pretty much what we're here for today. Mary went over the conditions and the restrictions in the cup. There are 20 of them. If you look at the picture we have, there are 20 birds in flight. That's a pure coincidence. I don't know why that happened. I just noticed that this afternoon. But we put 12 bullet points because we feel those are the main areas. And if you have any questions about any of those, we'll be happy to talk about them. But we do agree with all of the conditions, and we will live by them. Here's something that's not in your materials, and I think it's something that's pretty important. It's the economic impact that this quarry has upon the local economy. There's a company in Topeka called Go Topeka. You'd expect them to be in Topeka. And they have a personnel on board whose job it is to look at numbers and then tell us what the economic impact is. And I worked with Molly Howie on this slide, and we gave her some numbers. At our quarry and the trucking jobs that it generates, we're confident that there are 70 jobs. We think that's low. I gave her conservative numbers. We're higher than that, but we went with 70 because that's a comfortable number. And in some of the numbers we gave her in terms of our output, and they produced that we're producing $8.5 million of value to the community. So there's also two other effects. There's the indirect and the induced. I have the definitions there. The indirect effect is the jobs and value created from our investment in work, including subcontractors and suppliers. And that creates another $3 million of value. And then the induced effect is the ripple, right? The ripple in the economy from the wages being spent by our employees, and then the people they spent that money with, they spend that money, and so forth, also with the subs and the suppliers. And that ripple effect creates another $1.7 million. I don't know why she's so exact that she can say that it ends in $758. I don't know why she does that, but she's confident in saying that just on the Douglas County side alone, it's $13.5 million a year. That's the effect on the local economy. The Shawnee County side, incidentally enough, we think that one produces another $4 million. And really, the quarry works as one, even though it's two CUPs in two different counties. So we're confident that our quarry for the local economy produces about $17 million a year. You have recommendation letters. You'll note that some of those are fine, upstanding citizens of Lawrence. We did produce a study. Probably one of the bigger concerns about quarries is how does it affect the property values around the quarry? And when we began our research, we found this study by the Phoenix Center. I might point out that's not University of Phoenix, that's Phoenix Center. And they produced a study, and like I said, we've included that. And their finding is that there's no compelling statistical evidence that rock quarries negatively impact home prices. Great, that's a macro study, great, that's good for us, but we decided to drill down and figure out what's going on here. And Cole, I believe you have a handout. We're going to give you this handout because this slide is impossible to read. But what I did was I picked the 11 properties, residences, that are closest to the quarry. And then I use numbers from the Douglas County Appraiser's website to track what they've done in 2016, 17, and 18. And I did not include homeowners' names, but I did include the parcel identification number. So you can go right to the appraiser's website, type in the PIN, and look this up yourself. So these are all the values. The one that kind of jumps out to me is on the south property. That's the top one, 1636 East 50th Road. That property adjoins our quarry. They touch it. It's right there. And you can see what their value has done. Their value has increased substantially, maybe more than most of the other properties on this slide. When you look at them holistically, these properties are averaging 4.79% increase per year. And I think that shows that this quarry is not impacting negatively property values. This is where our quarries are in the state of Kansas. And number one is Big Springs. And you can see that we've listed it as our functional heart. By the way, this map is also a pretty good map of where limestone is located at in the state of Kansas. And if you'll notice, there's nothing really north of Big Springs. And that's because the quality of the limestone really degrades once you get north. And the reason I point this out is because Douglas County gets to decide the CUP, right? But this is really a regional quarry. We're serving 8 or 9 counties and our rock's going into Nebraska. So while you get to decide the cup, it is a regional quarry and it serves a lot of customers. It's a very big quarry. This is a shot of inside our control center. Cole doesn't know it yet, but he owes these lovely ladies lunch for agreeing to use their picture. But the monitors up there, those are video feeds of all the quarries that we have. Each one of those monitors can do 16 different quarries. The sales transactions, the sales records, all the quarries run through Big Springs. So that's kind of what you're seeing right here as we record these transactions. So I attended last month's Planning Commission meeting. I've listened to a couple others, and I know that you all are very concerned about agriculture, and rightfully so. I do want to point out that one of our major products is a product called agricultural lime, ag lime for short. And I have a slide that shows all of the uses of ag lime, but it really has 2 main uses. Number one, it increases the pH of acidic soil. In Kansas, the more you grow and the more you take out product, it increases the acidity of the soil. So this increases the pH. I'm going to be adding some of this to my tomato garden later this fall. Maybe the boss will let me have some at cost. The other thing that it does is that it puts calcium and magnesium into the soil. And if you think about it, when the plants uptake the calcium, a feed animal eats the plants, feed animal leaves, that animal's taking the calcium with it. So it has to be replenished into the soil. This is the major way you do that. And this Big Springs quarry alone, we sell 65,000 tons of it to local farmers. Switching topics a little bit, this is the trade publication for what we do. In the July 2018 issue of this magazine, we were on the front cover as an environmentally friendly operations. And we made this, one of the reasons this picture is here is because our crushing operation is actually enclosed by buildings. You don't see this at other quarries. It's enclosed here. It combats dust being thrown into the atmosphere and noise. Reclamation is the topic I'm going to end with. I'm going to show you a short video. We're very proud of how we reclaim. This is a picture of a quarry in Franklin County. As you can see, there's no equipment on it. The operator has gone, and they've left it like this. We have won 3 governor awards since 2012 for the work we've done at Big Springs Quarry, and all 3 of those awards are Douglas County land. We took those awards, we packaged them together, and we applied for the national award, and we're proud that just 6-7 weeks ago we found out that we won the National Association of State Land Reclamationists National Award, so we're very proud of that. The Capital Journal just put us on the front page, talking about, you might recognize the top picture, and of course Cole, the face of Mid-States Materials, talking about our award, so we're very proud of what we do. And right now we want to show you that video while I still have my 15 minutes. It's a very quick video.
Our goal is to leave the land aesthetically pleasing, but for the land to also have a meaning for the future generations. The Big Springs Quarry is a 2,000-acre surface quarry that has several different phases. We just finished our third phase and completed the full reclamation of that phase. Once we extract the limestone, we try and backfill and reclaim as we go. At the end of mining, we then grade the layout of the land and spread topsoil and seed. We're really excited to show the after product of mining responsibly. Our goal in reclamation is to put the ground back even better than what it was when we found it. We've planted 900 trees for quail and pheasant, stocked over 100,000 fish, and spent over 10,000 man-hours reclaiming the Big Springs Quarry. It takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of time, and a great plan, but look what we can put back after we mine responsibly.
And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Thank you, we may. So as a public hearing item, do we have members of the public who would like to speak on this item? As soon as Mary gets situated here, you can step on up. And if you would sign in with your name, please.
Okay.
We're going to bring up a map, maybe people can point if they're in the area where they're at.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Phil Porter. I'm with Buckley Powder Company. We're an explosive services provider in the state of Kansas and many other states in the Midwest. I'm here really to talk about blasting and blasting regulations. In addition to what Mary said about Mine Safety and Health Administration, there are a sundry of agencies that regulate explosives, rightly so. In the state of Kansas, the authority having jurisdiction over blasting and blasters mainly is the Kansas Fire Marshal's Office. They have adopted the National Fire Protection Association standards, which are a national standard that is developed with government agencies, with industry experts, and with professionals from the academic groups. They get together and develop regulations, and they've done this over decades now. So what they have in place is very well thought out, very well tested, and they continually evaluate what regulations they have. To be a blaster in this state, you must take a 20-hour course of course room work, which is very intensive in math. You must pass an exam that is approved by the State Fire Marshal's Office, and then you must have site-specific training once you get out into the field. In addition, all their employees receive safety refresher training annually. In addition to that, your blasters must receive, in addition to their normal training, they must receive blasting-specific training. Modern blasting is very much a science. The mechanisms we use to monitor our blast and to keep them within compliance of these regulations is well thought out and has been around for decades also. The blasters encounter very unpredictable situations every day, but they're trained professionals that do know what they're doing. The regulations that have been established are specifically intended so that if the blaster remains within compliance, he does not damage property outside of his blasting area. They are developed so that you can effectively break the rock, but not break something else. Buckley Powder Company has been doing business with Mid-States Materials before they came to the Big Spring Quarry. We have found them to be very ethical, very honest, and very good to deal with. And usually this organization exceeds the regulations. There aren't a whole lot of groups out there that will do that, but even their 500-foot, thank you, even their 500-foot barrier points out they're going well beyond what anyone else might do. Thank you, and if you got any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Go ahead.
I kind of feel bad I didn't put a presentation together for tonight, but you're just going to have to listen to our voices, okay? So thank you this evening for taking the time to hear our concerns and reflect upon Bill, my husband's, and my name is Michelle, best perspective here tonight. First, we want to acknowledge Big Springs Quarry on their successful business here in Douglas County. I think their numbers really speak for themselves that we saw here earlier. We realize how important the quarry business is to the planning and the development of our community. But with that being said, we are also very passionate about bringing our plans of our homestead to completion. The records show that Big Springs Quarry has come before both the Douglas County Planning Commission and the Douglas County Commissioners multiple times during the current CUP. This pattern produces uncertainty and roadblocks and lack of predictability for current residents that live, and that's a very key word, that live next to the quarry. So our goal here this evening is to share with you the important facts supporting our perspective. And before I go any further, I'll show you guys, if I can find the mouse. This is our current resident right here, and this is our property here, and this is currently phase 6 again, where they're mining. So our goal here again this evening is to share with you guys some important facts supporting our perspective as a tax-paying resident that actually lives next to the quarry. Number one, last commissioners meeting in June 2013, Commissioner Thelman stated that she sees a neighborhood that has lived through the quarry and expects a light at the end of the tunnel and needs some predictability. And we couldn't agree with that statement more. Number two, Commissioner Flory at this same meeting stated that there is nothing in the CUP that prohibits the quarry from pausing all quarry in Douglas County and then moving their quarry to Shawnee County or any other county that they have, and then coming back years later to Douglas County to finish quarrying. This fact puts our plans of building on hold or at the mercy of the quarry's business plan. Number three, when we originally purchased property in Douglas County, it was our understanding that the quarry CUP expired in 2020, coming up here. And honestly, we thought they would never even get to phase 6, but then they changed the order in which the phases were supposed to be quarried, or our understanding of how they were going to be quarried. They did this so they could complete phase 6 prior to the current CUP expiring. Now that they started quarrying in phase 6, which is the one closest to us, we have no end in sight if the original time frame is not held up. If we had fully understood this situation, we would not have purchased this property.
The fact that the CUP could change so frequently was not communicated with us. And we certainly didn't understand that CUPs are not rock-solid contracts. Did you get that? Rock, solid. I'm playing off your rock chalk, okay?
I'm
But
sorry,
we
Mary,
really
since
didn't
it's
understand
keep an
that
eye on the
comment.
clock also. We've come over our 30.
I'm sorry?
I forgot to watch the clock, but we're over our 30.
I thought we got 5 minutes as a group. We thought we were a
sorry,
group.
3 minutes for whoever would like to speak. If you'd like to have your husband take over and have another.
Okay, you want to start on number 4?
We had been told that it's possible to complete Phase 6 by 12/19/20 by Cole Anderson himself, but the quarry is reluctant to put this in writing. Without having this in writing, we have no guarantee that this would be completed in 10 years, 20 years, or whatever the quarry decided to complete Phase 6. So we want to encourage the planning committee to ask the quarry to set up a time frame for this to be done. Phase 6 should not, we feel that Phase 6 should not be included in the new CUP. It should be completed per the original CUP timeframe. Ask yourself, if you were in our situation and you had somebody next to you that had an open-end timeframe to do a job, and that really interferes with our plans. So we're offering 2 options to be considered. One is to leave Phase 6 completely out of the new CUP and hold the quarry to finish it as per the original CUP by 12/19/20. Or add an agreement in the new CUP as following. The time frame for completion of any phase is dependent on the market demand. However, the operator agrees to continuously mine Phase 6 within the limits of the CUP restrictions and not leave the quarry into another county, and that's a key word, so that Phase 6 can be completed as soon as possible, or preferably before December 19, 2020. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both of you.
So we still have another minute, right?
Can you sign in for me?
Oh, he did.
I have a question for everybody present.
We
Who all here?
Can't do that.
feel free to ask the question, but we won't answer it until it comes back up to this body or.
Okay.
But. And we may have further questions for you as we get to the discussion. Any other members of the public would like to speak? There's so many of you, someone will. Sorry, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. My name is Scott Carlson. I am the Mineland Reclamation Program Manager for the state of Kansas. I'm also Assistant Director of the Division of Conservation. I also manage the Ag Lime Sampling Program for the state of Kansas as well. And I work for the Kansas Department of Agriculture out of Manhattan. Up until 4 years ago, we were in Topeka. And I come to these meetings just for informational purposes. I like to provide planning staff and commissioners with some information about state reclamation requirements. And I'll just cut to the chase. Our requirements are far less than what you have in Douglas County. As such, we actually accept the bonding requirements, the bonding documents that you have in Douglas County in lieu of a state requirement to get a bond. We do this in several counties that have very robust bonding requirements. As far as compliance with program requirements, whether it be, of course, the bonding, the reclamation planning, the reporting, site registration and licensing, I can tell you the Mid-States Materials is always on top of things. As you can see, they have a very professional staff. They incorporate reclamation into their business model. They do an exemplary job. I recommended them for the national award this year to the National Association of State Land Reclamationists, which I am a member. They were blown away by the application. I can tell you, I'm very proud that we have more winners in the state of Kansas than any other state in the country. And we're very pleased to see Mid-States Materials get the national award. We've got over 900 registered sites, private and county, in the state of Kansas. We have about 380 total private and county operators in the state of Kansas. So, you know, there's a lot of competition out there. And I've seen a lot of reclamation. And I've seen, you know, some operators that don't really care so much about what they do. And I can tell you, when they try to expand their operations, if they don't do the right thing, and Mid-States Materials has been doing this for a number of years, they know the importance of community and doing the right thing by the landowners. They've always done an exemplary job. So I do have some fact sheets here that explain what the state reclamation requirements are. I'd like to leave those with your staff, if I may. Also my business card, although Mary knows me. She calls me a couple times a year to check on compliance status of quarry operators within your county. But with that, I'll be around if you have any questions.
Thank you, we may. Any other comment?
Good evening. Sign in real quick. My name is Chad Hassler. And I am not an expert, but I am an employee of Mid-States Materials. I am also a lifelong resident of Douglas County and currently live in Lawrence. I'm a new employee of Mid-States, and from day one, I just wanted to say that it is very obvious when you start there the importance they place on both the environment and safety, as well as the great pride they take in the measures they take to ensure those two things. So like I said, I'm not an expert and I don't have a whole lot to say, but I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Step on up.
Hello, my name's Bill Collins. I'm the general manager for Capital Trucking in Topeka. I'd just like to say we're obviously in favor of the continued success of Mid-States and this obviously this new expansion. Just a quick little short summary of since my short time with the company. 2012 started with five trucks, dump trucks. Now have grown that thanks to their business model and the growth that we've been able to, you know, benefit with them along the way. We're now approaching 60 power units. We also employ third parties that help us with our other workloads in the neighborhood, depending on the workload of the day, additional 45 to 70 additional trucks. Obviously, a lot of that material comes out of the Big Springs Quarry and obviously other related quarries that they operate. Just a little tidbit of, you know, it's been a good success for Capital Trucking. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen our trucks run around. There's probably many of you that may have taken a rock delivery from one of our trucks to maybe your house, or I know into this county for sure because we haul an awful lot into Lawrence and Douglas County. I guess to just summarize, I can see these folks' point of wanting Phase 6 completed. I'd love to have that big of a pond in my backyard, so to build a house and overlook that. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody?
Oh, good evening. I'm Bob Hinthorn. I'm a retired geologist from the Kansas Department of Transportation. I'm now the project geologist for Capital Geotechnical Services. Part of my duties as a geologist for the Department of Transportation was going out and sampling and doing inspections on rock quarries. I started going into this rock quarry in April of 1994. So I've been in and out of that quarry for many, many years. This quarry produces some of the best and finest aggregate available in this area. KDOT has sampled that quarry since Mid-States has taken it over in 2007, 57 times. It's been sampled by KDOT. Every one of those samples have passed. They've all complied on the official quality requirements for KDOT. So it's very important that we continue to produce aggregate of this quality from this area, and truly based on what is available in other areas to the north. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I think we'll close the public comment section of the item, and we'll come up to the commission for discussion or questions.
Point of order, we're going to give the applicant a chance.
Oh, I'm
to
sorry.
rebut.
Yes. 5 minutes to respond to the public comment.
Thank you.
Well, I'm not going
Thank
to
you.
take 5 minutes. We've met with the best, and we understand their concerns, and we are committed to doing that Phase 6, the purple phase. We will not leave that, and I think that's in the conditional use permit that's in front of you. We will not leave it until it's done. We think we can get it done by the end of 2020. The way the economy is churning right now, it seems likely, but you don't know what's going to happen in 6 months or a year and a half to the national economy. That's the one thing, or even the local economy, that could hold us up. But we are committed. We're not going to go anywhere else. We're going to finish that phase before we go anywhere else. And then that phase is going to look like the reclamation you've already seen. It will. It'll be beautiful. I would point out that it seems like we're adding a lot of land, but we are taking some out. Of the 569 acres that we are adding, only 376 of it is mineable. A lot of that is ravines, valleys. The geography prevents us from doing some things, plus the setbacks. So we're really only adding 376 acres of mineable land. The other thing is that I remember being here last month, and the little 8-acre boat storage had like 10 or 12 different people come up and talk against it. And here we are with this big project, and we only have one couple, and they didn't even say they were against it. They just had concerns. And I think that shows the type of company that we are. We made 11 different contacts with 11 different families. We met with them, some of them multiple times, to hear their concerns and to see what we could do and help them help us. And I think that the fact that there's not a lot of people up here is a testament to the work that we've done and promise that we will continue to do. So, if you have any questions.
Thank you. We likely will. All right, now it comes up to us for discussion. Well, I'll start if no one else will. And that is, I'd like to ask the bests again for the last question that you had, and I'm afraid I cut you off for that. If you'd like to address what that was, but also I'd like to ask specifically the contingency that's been put into the CUP that they keep at the Section 6 until it's finished. Is that, and which I believe was in response to your concerns, is that adequate? Have you felt comfortable with that since that's been added to this item?
Yeah, we thought that was very weak because, again, if you think about the quarry and how busy they are, they can choose to stay in Phase 6 and quarry there, or they can go 2 blocks to the west and go to Shawnee County and then come back 5 or 10 years later to Phase 6. And we have some plans. We would like to build ourselves, but we don't want to build till they're done with Phase 6. So that's why we put in writing what we'd like to see it or have a time frame around it. With how busy they are, I don't understand why they can't commit to the current CUP and having this done by 2020.
Thank you. And there was another specific question?
Did you have a question?
When did we meet with you? I don't remember. No. You said we.
Yeah, Cole did.
Oh, okay. Because I thought
Because I hadn't met you till tonight.
Yeah, I thought I was losing my mind.
Thank you.
And one other thing.
Sorry.
I was wondering if everybody who is a resident of Douglas County could raise their hand.
We, all of us or all of them?
Oh, okay.
Everybody this side of the podium.
I have a question for staff and related to that item. So as we cover as the quarry covers 2 counties and we have a CUP for Douglas County, we already have some language in there saying, complete the phase 6 before moving on. Does that also cover what may or may not be done in Shawnee County? So that's some question.
Well, they can quarry in Shawnee County anytime. I think their concern is they'll take the equipment from Phase 6 and stop quarrying there and go also quarry more in Shawnee County. But I thought the condition said they would quarry continuously in Phase 6, meaning they wouldn't take the equipment away. So we could add wording saying the equipment won't be removed, or, but I thought it addressed it enough just to say they would quarry continuously per the restrictions in the CUP.
Thank you.
I might add, just my opinion, I think it would be difficult for us to regulate a CUP in another county, whether it's adjacent county or one of the multiple, quarries in the region. But on the other side, I think you've heard representation that they are committed, on the Douglas County side anyway, to stay in Phase 6. In that vein, I think that there could be some tightening up of the language, that they don't move out of Phase 6 to any of the new phases of this CUP until Phase 6 is complete and reclaimed. That's my opinion. And it's tough to put a date on quarries. Quarries are kind of a unique animal. They're very much market-driven in terms of the demand and the actual quarrying. But we can check with the county counselor on this issue, but I don't know that we have any authority over the quarry in Shawnee County.
Thanks for the clarification.
I have a geology question. Since we're talking about the possibility of somehow having continuous mining of just Phase 6 or whatever, or color purple or whatever we're calling it in the new proposed plan, is this a homogeneous bed of limestone, or are there different quarryable materials spread throughout here that depend on the market demand? I mean, are different qualities, or is it all the same?
At this site, we're mining 3 different limestone units, the Irvine Creek, the Rock Bluff, and the Ozaki limestone. The main unit we're after is the Irvine Creek. It's the thickest, also has the highest quality. It has made on-grade concrete rock specifications for KDOT, so that we can put it into concrete pavement. Those ledges are all separated by a shale, which makes it a difficult thing. We have to break the Irvine Creek out, remove the shale, take the Rock Bluff out, which is only 2.3 feet thick, take the next shale out, and then blast the Ozaki out and crush that.
Well,
So,
the real point of my question is there anything that's market-driven, since that's one of the conditions, depending on the market, that would prompt you to go to a different location to quarry a particular material for a specific need?
if we would move to a different phase, we would be quarrying basically the exact same limestone units as we're doing here. So it doesn't make any sense to move to a new site to start quarrying the same rock units. A lot of times people say, well, why don't you go deeper and see what's there? The next mineable limestone ledge is 168 feet below the Ozaki limestone. So we go through 168 feet of shale, sandstones, and those type of units to get to the very next mineable type of limestone.
So it's best for your business model to finish this phase too?
Correct.
Okay, before you move everything off to another location?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
We don't gain anything by moving to another
All right,
site.
thanks.
Question for the applicant. In the hydrologic study, you're monitoring wells within a half mile of where you're doing the blasting. Is there any monitoring of the existing embankment ponds that are around there and those other stock water structures that are in the area?
In that area, we either own or lease almost all those you see on that map.
Right. The ones outside of your ownership, I mean, there's still a number of ponds in the area that you don't-
Outside of them, we would need the property owner's permission to go on the property, and if they would give it.
As you do with the wells.
Yeah. Well, oddly enough, we looked at the wells this week because we thought this might come up. There aren't any wells in a half mile of this quarry, so we agreed to something that it might not matter. We didn't know that before we agreed with Mary, but we did the study of the wells, and there aren't any within that half mile. But as you heard the blasting person say, the blasting as a science, those guys have really got this down. The seismology reports, they just don't show there's going to be there's not going to be any damage off the blast site.
That'd be my concern, because the embankment ponds that are close, and we're right above the lake. So.
If anybody wants us to look at them, we'd go look at them. And furthermore, we've looked at the language that the bests propose, and it says preferably by or before December 19th. That language is fine. It's fine with us. We think that language is kind of what Mary has captured in the CUP. So.
Commissioner Sinclair.
Can I ask a question that's going to get in the weeds again? Maybe.
Go for it.
I was kind of interested in the change in the condition of having a $10,000 bond to just maintaining $100 million liability insurance. From your perspective, Mr. Eckert, what's the purpose of that?
Well, it's a much greater protection to someone whose property might be damaged. When you exhaust a bond at the $10,000 level, that's it. There's nothing else there. Then you'd have to go into civil litigation.
Mm-hmm.
Here we have an insurance policy, and like I said, as mentioned, it's actually over $1 million, to tell you the truth. We've agreed to the $1 million limit, but that policy is there, and we think it provides actually greater protection than a bond would.
To the property owners or to the company?
Both.
Yeah.
Both. Yeah, we would not do business if we only had $10,000 worth of protection.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay.
But it does provide protection both ways.
Okay. I just think it's kind of interesting because I'm not totally clear on the differences between the protections afforded a property owner, a third party, not the business. I know liability insurance primarily is going to benefit the business because you're insulated from, you have the insurance protection if there's a large
If
loss,
you've been
but-
damaged, the procedures are the same both
Okay.
ways. There's not a different procedure to apply against a bond or against an insurance policy. It would look the same.
Are there requirements as to what these policies need to have in them or not have in them by way of coverage exclusions and those sorts of things? Or is it just, you can go out and get any certificate of liability insurance for $1 million that may have some pretty egregious exclusions in terms
Well,
of what to cover?
our insurance policies are shopped by Mike Shermer, our COO, and I know that he spends the greater part of a month when we shop our insurance. And, quarrying is one of those, there's explosives on site, right? It's a little bit more dangerous than, growing corn or wheat or something like that. It is. So we have to have insurance policies that are robust, if I could use that word. If they exclude a lot of stuff, that doesn't mean that we don't get sued, and it doesn't mean that we wouldn't lose. So we actually need an insurance policy that's going to cover more, not less, because we're still the ones that get sued. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
So if they exclude a lot of stuff, that insurance is useless to us, because the more they exclude, that would be more that we'd have to pay out of our own personal pocket. So it doesn't make financial sense for us to have a lot of exclusions. We actually want the opposite.
Okay.
Well, I'll weigh in. There was a lot in this proposal that I appreciated, and some of those things were, the increase to go from the $10,000 bond to a $1 million liability insurance policy for damages, and the buffers around the houses and the structures. And I liked being willing to work with the Bests through that process of giving them some assurances so that they can move forward with their lives also. And that's why I was checking with the language in terms of if that got close to what you were hoping for. It seems like the only difference between the 2 points of view would be a specific time frame, and just knowing the construction industry and its booms and busts, even though things are going well now, it sounds like there's a real good faith effort, and it's encoded in the language to stick with that area until it is finished. I wouldn't be in favor of a specific time frame, just because I'm not sure that they would have any say over that if the demand were to change. Though I do think it sounds like within a reasonable amount of time that could be finished up given the pace of business. So in terms of the acreage increase for what's being mined at a particular time, I didn't have a significant problem with that either, going from the 30 acres to the 40 acres in terms of efficiency for the business, for the equipment, and getting that worked on. And the hours, I was curious, I mean, we didn't have any input from residents nearby about the change in hours. I'm not sure it's a significant difference on the Monday through Friday. Have the operation hours always been fairly long? Not the sales hours, but the operation hours? Have they always gone that late, till that 10 p.m.? Or is that a change also?
No, that's not a change.
We've never ran past 6 o'clock, production one.
But
whatever it is now, we've not run till 10 o'clock at night.
So does the current CUP have that, for 6 o'clock, or is it 10 p.m.?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was just curious if that was a change
No.
in the CUP.
No.
But,
And like I said, we've never even come close to that late at night.
It's 10 p.m.
It is currently? Okay, so that's not a change. Thank you. One more question. There were a couple of references to the 1042. I assume that's the elevation, the lowest elevation for the rock extraction. Is that, it wasn't clear in the report, but is that what that's referring to? Okay, thanks. Any other questions or discussion?
I would echo Chair Willie's comments. I also appreciate the work you've done with the adjacent residents, and the willingness to adopt the language proposed by the Bests in an effort to speed, or at least stick to the production out of Phase 6. I think that is important, and I was glad to see that that language. I also agree with Commissioner Willie that I don't think the specific time frame could be put on it, because that is not necessarily in your control. And I also have no problem with the increase to 40 operation acres. I think that's all okay. And I do appreciate the reclamation work that you've done to date. I would look forward to seeing a beautiful reclamation of Phase 6, hopefully.
I think I have a question or two for staff. In the current CUP, one of the conditions from the 1992 CUP was there would be no future request to expand the size of the quarry. What was the reasoning behind that? Does anybody know?
I don't know, but the quarry hadn't started yet, so they had an application. Before they started, they had another application to add this land, and I assume the neighbors thought, wow, that's a lot, let's stop it now. So, but I wasn't there, and the minutes don't really reflect it, but I think since it happened even before they started quarrying, neighbors probably thought, well, this is just going to be ongoing every few years, we're going to be having this request. And so on those conditions, we asked the county counselor, could we change them with this CUP? And he said, yes, they're like all the other conditions, that you can change those.
My other was the extent of the time for the request for the CUP. The original was, I take it, for 30 years, and it has another 2 years plus a couple of months to go till, what, December 19th or something of 2020?
Yeah.
And this is a request to extend 30 years past that endpoint to 2050. Given that nobody's around to actually remember what we're deciding, wouldn't it be better to have just a review at some shorter time period?
Well, we have 5-year administrative reviews, and then we review, they have to submit plans before they move into every phase, and they have to submit reclamation plans. So there is a lot of ongoing review.
Okay.
Most of them don't require public input, the reclamation plans do go to the county commission, so they can kind of keep up to date with that. But I think they put the 30 years on, it's kind of like when you have an event center and you put a 10-year deadline on it, kind of see what's happening in the area, and so people, when it runs out, they have to renew it, so everybody's aware of what's happening. Rather, you could take away the time frame and just have it when you're done. Is that what you're suggesting?
No, I'm more like, one of the concerns raised by the BEST was, they purchased property with the expectation that this was going to be completed by 2020 under the original CUP, and now we're asking that this go out to 2050. Now, not for the particular portion that they're concerned about, but there is that predictability. I mean, one of the statements is in here to give more predictability by having a longer time frame, but we've had multiple alterations just in this 30 years.
And it's kind of a balance. We want to use all the limestone, because if you let the CUP expire and you say the time frame's up, the CUP's expired, you're just going to get a new CUP application.
Right.
So, and that doesn't help anyone, because all those people are going to think, oh, it's gone, and make their plans, and then the next month there's a new CUP application. So maybe the 30-year time frame should be more clear, like we do with other time frames. It expires in 30 years unless an extension is approved, and that way people know that's not a dead date. It's a date that we
That
look
would
at.
be helpful for people moving in, just to add that phrase, unless there's an extension. Or, we already have built in that if there's a change in ownership, we're going to come back for another review. That one's remaining in here. I think that's a good check. And I don't know if there's anything else anybody could think of that might be a trigger event that might bring us back in. If there are concerns raised in the inspections by the county or things like that.
Well, the administrative review would collect complaints or offenses or things like that, and that's a 5-year, did you say? The administrative review?
We do administrative reviews every 5 years. A lot of times we're out there more often, and so those count as those 5-year reviews, because when they complete a phase, we have to go out and check the reclamation. And then when they move into a new phase, we work on operation plans. And then if there's compliance issues, that can just go directly to the county commission.
Right, like the one that was
Right.
spotted before. Okay. I'm just trying to make sure we have those checks in there instead of just go for 30 years without actually knowing what's occurring out there. And I have to say, I've lived here as long as this has been around, and I've never heard of an issue. So, this is one of those areas, and I have about some other quarries, but not this one. So.
Well, and Commissioners, I might speak to that issue. This company has been, I think, a joy to work with in the time that they've owned this quarry. They actually purchased it with a number of issues that they did correct. These weren't always good meetings to attend and work through. So I think we have a high confidence level with this operator, and we appreciate the condition about operators changing hands and reviewing that next operator, because quarries are a little bit unique, and they do demand a few pages of conditions and a lot of oversight and local and state review of these things. And the operator seems to matter in these. And so we have a high level of confidence that we'll continue with very efficient closings and openings of new sites on this quarry.
Another question for Mary. If this passes, does it become immediately in effect, or does the old CUP run to the end of 2020 and then this one take effect? This would replace?
This replaces it.
Okay, so replace, okay, thank you. I would entertain a motion if anyone's ready.
Well, will this one go to 2048 or 2050 then?
It'll actually go 30 years from the date that the county commission approves it, so
Okay.
depending on when that happens.
Okay.
Commissioner Sinclair?
Well, just to clarify, have we discussed potentially 2 minor changes to the conditions that are laid out in here? One being adding the language about preferably on or before December 19th, 2020 or something, or whatever it was that the best suggested, and then also referencing the chance or the possibility that it could be extended in the future. Were those the 2 things we've talked about, or were there other?
I think those were both of them, yes.
2 holidays.
And the 2 holidays, yes.
Thank you. Okay.
And those language, those 3 pieces of language, are those acceptable to you as the applicant?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Sorry, are those acceptable to you as the applicant?
Yes.
So, okay, thank you. Commissioner Struckoff.
I move that we approve the CUP application for the Big Springs Quarry based on the findings of fact listed in this report and subject to the revised restrictions and conditions discussed here tonight.
Thank you, and do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion on this item? All right, all in favor? And opposed? Would be none, so 8-0. Thank you, everyone, for coming out for this. We have.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
and again, I do want to thank the planning staff, they've been very good with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a couple of miscellaneous items.
Yes. First of all, I do want to mention, I thought that was an excellent presentation Mary gave on a very complex,
It was
large
very
project.
complex.
Giving you the current and proposed regs and the graphics, and so kudos to her on that. Very quickly, these miscellaneous items. One, we've talked quite a bit about initiating a text amendment to explore alternative language on conditional zoning, and so this is the opportunity to do that and put us to work and bring you back a draft set of standards at some point for a public hearing. So we just do that, need a motion to get that started.
Well, we'll make the motion to initiate a text amendment to define conditional zoning and such other recommendations that we want to forward to the city and county.
And I will second it. All in favor? 8-0. It's been a lucky night.
The next item sort of came on abruptly as we were trying to orchestrate this downtown master plan, and this particularly a steering committee that is going to accompany the scope of it. And we're going to have this as a mid-month meeting to explore a little more fully what to expect with the downtown master plan process. But we did put into your packet our memo that went to the city commission just last night. And the city commission made a couple of changes to the list of steering committee members, but the planning commission, the representation of one commissioner was always on the list. The changes made last night were that there are technically, per our current database, 2 ORIA neighborhood associations. And we included both of them. There was discussion by the commission that they wanted 1 rep from the ORIA neighborhood to be determined by those 2 groups and then give us the name. So if you look through the list of memberships, most of them are appointed by the groups themselves. So it's a 17 it was 17 members at that point. They dropped one of those, but they added the Chamber of Commerce, and a representative from the Affordable Housing Advisory Board. So we're at 18-member steering committee. The steering committee is right now planned to meet 3 times with the consultant at various stages of the downtown planning process. So that's the time commitment with it. I would envision a couple of hours each meeting, maybe a little bit of prep work to read what, ultimately what the plan draft would be. But what we need is this body's appointment to pass on to include within that group. And we're trying to get all the appointments made in September. So I forget the exact timeline, I apologize, but this fall, October, November, we will be kicking off that process.
All right. Hopefully everyone has thought long and hard about how much they really want to be on this committee. For my part, I would like to nominate Commissioner Payden to that position. Are there other nominations? You sure? You can nominate yourself. Well, with that, I guess we will take a vote on.
Second the nomination.
All right. On Commissioner Payden for the Downtown Master Plan Steering Committee. All in favor? I think it passed.
Enthusiastic.
Yes.
Scott, may I just pose a question?
Sure.
What is the total number of appointments, as far as you know, to be made to accessory commissions and committees from this body? Any idea? Because we've got various representatives to different committees. I'm just curious if, as a rookie, over the course of a term, one should be prepared to volunteer inevitably for a committee. That's
Well, we have a couple special committees like this one that pops up, and they're pretty rare. By ordinance, a member of this commission is appointed to the MPO by design. Transportation, two actually, 2 members. Annually, we do our little subcommittee for the annual retreat, orientation day. And then there are some committees called as needed, like we have had committees on downtown or comprehensive plan amendments. New chapters to Horizon 2020 had committees. Those sorts of special projects that pop up. But by and large, those are the ones. Am I missing any, Jeff? Horizon 2020 Steering Committee was probably a bad example to use. It was got a little bit out of hand, but yeah, that's where we're at.
Okay, thank you. So on average, more than 8 or 9?
At any one time, a few, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You'll probably have a chance with
We'll find something for you.
the new comprehensive plan.
Do we have any other business? All right, then we are adjourned.
Do you know how hard it is for me to keep my mouth shut up here?
I do a little.